I'm going to start colorizing this image using Photoshop. I'm going to show you some of the tools in Photoshop that can be used to colorize a black and white image. The first thing I want to show you, first we have to go to the toolbar. This is the toolbar in Photoshop. This is the Marquee Tool, and I do need the rectangular Marquee Tool for this. I'm going to make a rectangle around Trixie. I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation. Now, because it's black and white, it won't take color unless I tell it to tint. Colorize tells it to tint. So I'm going to get into here a nice green and saturate it. Saturation means more of the same, more color. I'm going to lighten it up because it's a little dark. Lighten and darken does not mean contrast. That's a whole different thing. We're not going to do that right this second. So we have green. That's one way to colorize one of these squares. I'm actually going to move these marching ants to the quarter. And the way I did that is I was in the rectangular Marquee Tool, I moved my cursor into the middle of the marching ants and was able to move the marching ants. This is what's called a stencil in Photoshop. Again, I go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, Colorize. Now gold would be nice, so maybe if I just add some saturation to that, I have what I want. Awesome. Okay. There we go. Now let's say I want this shape for some of the others, but I'm not sure when or how. So select, the drop-down select can save this shape, and you can move it anywhere you want as long as you're in a selection tool. Save selection, square, and then I'm going to go. Now when I click OK, it's going to come up in the Channels panel because that's where it saves selections. This is a short Photoshop lesson. We don't need the marching ants right now. Select, deselect, Command D on a Mac, Control D on a PC. Now there's another way. I was unable to use hue saturation color correction on my logo. So what I want to do is go down the tool panel here and get the rectangular marquee. Now my logo is kind of a beige and black, or else it can take on the color of the outside of whatever it's on. I happen to have this color here. I'm going to, let's see, close the properties panel right now. Let's say if I go here to multiply, there it is, beige and black, but it's still too orange. So what I do if I'm using a vector shape, color square is what I'm using. I'm going to double click and I'm going to make it a little lighter tint. And if you look, it does it in real time. If I went there, it made it white, which is not what I want. I want this a little more subtle than what I had, but now it colorized it, and I used a square of color and I used a blend mode. Right here are blend modes. Let's do something a little bit different. I'm going to go to the crab. Let's go to the crab and colorize this, only we're not going to use a blend mode. This jumped up, and I could actually change the color here. I'm going to change it to a pink. And I could have double-clicked this also to change it to pink. I'm not going to use a blend mode. I'm just going to change the transparency or opacity. There's my crab. There's my crab. And I think this needs to be a really light opacity. So that was another way to colorize one of these squares. Let's go to the rose. This time I'm going to load the square that I saved in the channels panel by going to select, load selection. I can have many alpha channels. That's called an alpha channel. There's the square. Okay, now the last time I used it, it was, or when I saved it, it was here. So I'm going back here to my selection tool. I'm going to move this over to the rose. Oops. And it's not perfect, so I can move it with the arrow keys on my keyboard. Now I'm going to go back to image. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm on the rectangle. I need to be on the image. So I just moved back to the Trixieland image. There we go. Adjustments, hue saturation, colorize. I'm going to get a nice cyan blue. I'm going to bump up the saturation and click OK. And I go on and on to colorize all these squares and make a very pretty picture. Select, deselect. You can use different, if you're more familiar with Photoshop, you can use different selection tools. You could do a triangle with the polygon lasso and colorize everything within that triangle. If it doesn't quite, you have to end where you started. If you don't quite get there, hit the Command key on the Mac, the Control key on the PC, and you'll get that selection. And you'll be able to colorize everything within there. Image, adjustment, hue saturation, colorize, and now everything within there is colorized. I'm going to cancel this because I really don't want to do that. But I'm going to select, deselect. And the next thing, the last thing I'm going to do, I want to colorize these letters. I have to go to the magic wand. Usually you'll see the quick selection tool, but because there's a little arrow, the magic wand also lives there. I'm going to select the T. I'm going to go to my color picker down here at the bottom of the toolbar. Now, the more to the right, the more saturated, the more to the left, the more tinted, the further down, the darker version of the color that you'll get. I kind of want to make it a green chartreusey color, kind of a yellowy. Okay, great. I'm going to go to the paint bucket. The thing you'll usually see is the gradient tool, but the paint bucket will work really well for this. Click. Go back to the magic wand. Let's see, I'll select the E. I'll pick a color out of my swatches. Let's see, I'll get a forest green. Go back to my paint bucket and fill that with a forest green. And then I will go select, deselect. And one more, I'll go to the magic wand again and get the D. I want you should do them all. Get the D, and let's get a nice bright red. Back to the paint bucket, and now we have a nice bright red, and I have the hiccups, and I'm going to select, deselect, and that's the beginning of all the ways you can colorize this before we even get into the more sophisticated adjustment layers.